Hi, everyone. This is Emily Walker with the U.S. Embassy Algiers, and you're watching Let's Chat, a show about American culture hosted by the American Cultural Center Algiers. So all month we've been doing episodes in honor of Black History Month. Today we have a really great show with some impressive guests who are going to teach us something and play some live music. I'll introduce you first to our musicians. We have Haile Supreme, an artist who blends mystical blues, intergalactic soul, and roots reggae to create a truly unique sound. He's lent his vocals to hip-hop legends such as Nas, 2 Chainz, and Wiz Khalifa. He's toured the world with Congo Sanchez of Thievery Corporation, and he recently opened for Oprah Winfrey on her 2020 arena tour. Haile has channeled his many influences to create a voice that is one of a kind. Haile Supreme, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for that beautiful introduction. It's my honor to be here, and this is exciting.
Thank you. We're excited to have you. I'd also like to introduce you to another Brooklyn-based musician, although she's currently in Miami, Domenica Fossati, who's a Latin Grammy-winning flautist and recording artist. She's influenced by a wide range of musical styles, including jazz, rock, and hip-hop. Her work oscillates gracefully between art music and pop. As a teaching artist, Ms. Fossati advocates for music education, working with outreach programs for at-risk children. Dominica, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I want to mention that Domenica and Haile Supreme are both part of an organization that's called One Beat, which brings together young musicians from around the world to create original music. And I'm so excited to tell you that Algeria is going to be the site of One Beat Sahara, a music residency and concert. So this means musicians from the United States, as well as Algeria and some surrounding countries, including Mali, Niger, and Tunisia, are going to meet in Tagit in 2022 for a big, beautiful concert, and you are all invited. So last but not least, we're going to come back to the musicians and hear a performance at the end, but I'm going to introduce you to another guest who is actually a musician too, but he's here today in his capacity as a researcher and writer about African-American music, Dr. Stephen Lewis. He's also the curator of the brand new National Museum of African-American Music, which is in Nashville, Tennessee. His areas of research include African-American political thought, late 20th century jazz history, and 19th century African-American music. Hello, Dr. Lewis, and thank you for being here.
Hey, it's really great to be here. Thank you so much for that introduction. This is really, I'm very excited and honored to talk about African music today through the U.S. Embassy Algiers. And I just want to start off by saying African American music has definitely had a worldwide impact, but it's especially exciting to be presenting this music to an African audience today. The music has roots in West and Central Africa, but it also has important historical connections to North Africa as well. And so it's really a privilege to be here today and explain a little bit about the African American musical tradition before we hear the music later on.
We are honored to have you. I'll let you go ahead with your presentation. I just want to tell viewers on YouTube that you can ask questions to any of our guests in the YouTube chat, and we will get some of your questions to them. So without further ado, please teach us something interesting.
Awesome. So let's start out on the most basic level and say, what is African American music? So broadly speaking, African American music is the musical tradition or musical traditions created in the United States by people of African descent. And that's beginning as early as the 17th century and then continuing into the present day. African American music reflects a blend of the music of West and Central Africa with the music of Western Europe. And of course, these musical cultures came together in the United States, initially under the conditions of slavery, in which people were forcibly brought from West and Central Africa to the United States for the first couple centuries of American history. In addition to the West and Central African influences, there are also really important influences from the Caribbean, especially once we get into 20th century styles like jazz and hip hop. And then, of course, as we get into the later 20th century, we have the return of important African influences. So African influences are at the very beginning. And then, of course, in the later part of the 20th century, we have new groups of people coming from Africa, from various parts of Africa, and bringing their music with them, which in turn kind of revitalizes the African essence of the music as we move into the present day. Some of the various African-American musical styles include jazz, hip hop, blues, gospel music, funk, soul, and there are many others. It is not an exaggeration to say that the African-American musical tradition is really at the foundation of almost everything that we think of as American music today. To some extent or another, it grows out of that African-American tradition that I'm talking about. So Black music, African-American music, has a history that's more than 400 years long. And so I don't have time to tell the complete story of the music from its origins to the present this evening. And so what I want to do instead is to provide an introduction by giving an outline of some of the essential features of the African-American music tradition and what makes African-American music distinctive. That is musical qualities and things like that. So we'll go over a few key areas, listen to some music, and then we'll hear some live performance right afterward. So I'm going to share my screen now and pull up my PowerPoint presentation. Oop. Let's see. All right. And of course, let me know if there's any issues with sound or anything else. Okay. So we can think of the distinctive features of African-American music as falling under three major headings. First, we have sound quality. Second, we have mechanics of delivery. And third, we have style of delivery. And I'm going to go into more detail about what each one of these things represents as we get deeper into the presentation today. So those are our three broad headings. Okay, first, sound quality, or timbre. Timbre is another word for the quality of your sound, the nature of the sound you make with your voice or with your instrument. So musicians in African-American music traditions use a variety of techniques to get an expressive, vocally inspired sound out of their instruments. So there's a priority placed in many African-American musical traditions on almost making the instruments talk, right? Manipulating the sound so that you get a uniquely expressive sound. That's different from much European music, where the emphasis is placed on kind of purity of tone in many cases, this kind of abstract idea of this is what a good sound sounds like. This is a good, say, flute sound or something like that. In African-American music, a good flute sound is the sound that sounds most like you, or the sound that is the most expressive of what you were trying to get across at that moment musically. Also, under this heading, we have combinations of distinctive and contrasting timbres or sound qualities within an ensemble. That can be different types of instrument that have contrasting sound qualities. It can also be layering of different sounds on top of each other, like we see in a lot of electronic music and we see in a lot of hip hop. So let's listen to a couple of examples. The first one I'm going to play for us today is from 1929 by a blues guitarist named Blind Willie Johnson. What I want us to listen to is the way that he uses a slide to make his guitar have sort of a vocal effect. In other words, to make his guitar sound almost like a voice singing. And so really carefully, or really quickly, what he's doing, there's a piece of glass on his finger that he then slides up and down the fingerboard to create a vocal effect. Let's hear how that sounds. And so, you know, the thing about that performance, you can hear the guitar is really like a second voice. He's really having a dialogue with his instrument, you know. That's an example of what I'm talking about. And now let's quickly hear what it sounds like when you have contrasting timbres layered on top of each other. So the example I'm going to play next comes from a group called the Carolina Chocolate Drops. They're a traditional African-American string band. And in this group, you have a mixture of instruments like the banjo, the violin or fiddle, the bones, which is a type of percussion instrument, and then the jug, which is literally a jug, like a water jug that you blow over the top of to get a sound. And so all these different contrasting sounds are combined with each other to make a unique mixture. That's another characteristic of African-American music and African music as well. So it comes to African-American music from Africa. So an example of an ensemble with multiple contrasting sound qualities combined to make a unique group sound. Okay, let's move on to our next category, mechanics of delivery. And so what this means is how the musician achieves variety in their performance, the strategies a musician uses to create interest and variety in performance. So one way performers can achieve variety is through improvisation, which is of course creating new musical material on the spot, almost like talking. You know, you use a musical vocabulary that you have internalized to then create new music in performance in the moment. That's an important characteristic of a lot of different African-American traditions, including jazz for one. Another thing, performers can lengthen or add variety to songs using things like repeated words, phrases, sections, or musical patterns. Two examples of this that we'll hear in detail in a minute. One is call and response, in which a singer or instrumentalist makes a musical statement, which is then answered by another singer or instrumentalist or group. Second is what we call a riff. A riff is a repeated short rhythmic figure that provides support for an improvising soloist. So in other words, the soloist is playing, the band is playing these short figures under them to support them. Another way of achieving variety in performance, another mechanic of delivery, let's say, is performers often layer syncopated rhythms on top of each other to create polyrhythms. Let's stop for a moment and say, first, what is syncopation? Syncopation is when a performer places an emphasis on beats that are not normally stressed in Western music. So say instead of beats 1 and 3, maybe beats 2 and 4, maybe the beats in between the main beats, like beat 1.5, something like that. And a polyrhythm is when several contrasting rhythms are played simultaneously to create a kind of dense fabric of rhythmic material happening all at once. These are things, again, that come to African-American music via the African heritage of West and Central Africa. Okay, first, let's listen to some call and response singing. This is a work song, actually, that was recorded at a prison in Mississippi called Parchman Farm in 1947. This is a group of African-American men singing as they chop or rather hammer rocks. So this was recorded in the mid 20th century. It's called Rosie. So you can hear in that performance we just heard a minute ago, the way that the one lead singer would sing a line and then the whole group would respond to him. And so by doing that, you can actually continue to sing that song for a very long time, you know, by just having the group kind of respond to the lead singer. The purpose of a work song, really quickly, is actually to pace the work. So you can tell that, you know, the speed at which they were singing was meant to kind of indicate this is when we all will chop at the same time, right? And you can actually hear them chopping as they were singing. That's what a work song is. Of course, those songs developed during slavery in the United States. African Americans would sing those songs in order to pace their work and to make their work more bearable. They had to work all day in the hot sun. A contemporary or more contemporary example of call and response is the beginning section of this Tribe Called Quest song, Can I Kick It? Let's listen to this briefly. It's a classic recording, of course. But you can hear there at the beginning, again, they're using that call and response pattern there. When he says, can I kick it? The group responds, yes, you can. Okay, let's move on to our next example. So this is an example of polyrhythms. So listen carefully. This is a song called Iko Iko, recorded by the Dixie Cups, 1965. It's actually based on a folk song from New Orleans that came to New Orleans by way of probably Haiti. So this is a very old song that they then recorded and made a hit in the mid-60s. So if you listen, I'm just going to talk a little bit before we play it. If you listen, there are several different layers of rhythm happening. There's one, I think one group of the singers is playing actually a Coke bottle and the back of a chair tapping, and they're playing or something like that. And then you have someone else who's clapping on beats 2 and 4. So they're going 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you also have a bass line that's playing a different rhythm at the same time. And there's a vocal line on top of that. So there's 3 different contrasting rhythms playing, and then the vocalists are also singing their own rhythms. Let's hear how that sounds. So you can hear there at the end really clearly those different rhythmic layers. So the bass player is playing bum, bum, bum. And then the Coke bottle is playing, and then somebody else is playing on 2 and 4, just clapping. And so there's these different rhythmic layers that are all being played all at once and make this really complicated and fun and danceable sound.
I love that song. You just really can't hear it without wanting to move around. There's so much going on here. So fun.
And then, one more, well, actually 2 more, and then I'm talking a lot. Let's see. Okay, so next we have, so this is an example of riffs. So again, a riff is a short rhythmic figure that is played under an improvising soloist to provide them with support. And so riffs are very common in jazz. You could also actually say that riffs kind of carry over into hip hop as well. If you think about hip hop production, there are short melodic fragments that then are stitched together to make a beat over which the soloist, that is the MC in this case, would be rapping. And so it's the same device, but in a different context, right? Let's listen to the Count Basie Orchestra perform some riffs under the soloist. What you're gonna hear here is you'll have someone soloing, like say it's the trombonist is soloing and the saxophone players will play a repeated figure under them. and then a saxophone soloist will happen, and then there'll be trumpets playing a short figure under them. Again, this is to increase the tension of the performance and also to kind of give the soloist inspiration to, like, you know, play really exciting stuff. So let's hear 1 O'Clock Jump. This is from 1937. There's your riff. You had a trumpet player is playing a solo, and then the saxophone's on here playing. So they're going to play that rhythm over and over again. And this is, you know, in the 30s, the recordings they had at the time only lasted for 3.5 minutes. In performance, a soloist can play for like 20 minutes, and there can be a bunch of riffs that go under them, you know, to create melodic interest and rhythmic interest at different times. So you can actually expand this out for an indefinite amount of time. You know, there are stories of performances that lasted hours, you know, where people would just be exhausted at the end. So that's a characteristic of this music, is the flexibility of the length of the performances, because you can expand them using these devices like riffs, like improvisation, other things like that. And so finally, our last category is style of delivery. And what we mean by style of delivery is the importance of the body and of movement to musical expression. So within the African American and the African traditions, movement is an essential part of musical expression. And what that means is that on one level, music and dance are often inseparable. And so you hear people talk about music and dance as though they are connected, because they typically are. Performers, when they are performing, also use their bodies along with their voices and instruments to engage their audience. And audience response in the form of, say, foot stomping or clapping or body movements or dancing or verbal responses, like actually yelling encouragement at the performer, are not only expected, but they're actually encouraged, because the performer gets that energy from the audience, and that propels their performance and the spontaneity and ingenuity of their performance in the act of say, singing or playing. So for this, I want us to watch a video, because you have to watch a video to see how this works. We're going to watch a James Brown performance from 1964. And what I want us to pay attention to is, first of all, look at how he uses his body. Look at how he dances as he's singing. Look at how the backup dancers are also dancing. And then also listen to the screams from the crowd. The screams are an important part of this performance, because that is the audience engagement that's fundamental to the musical expression. And there are actually times when the audience is so excited it almost overwhelms the performance.
Wait a second. He's brought down houses from night. Yeah, right here. James Brown and his famous Flames.
Because home and it's stepping me, but I feel alive and uptight. Out of shape, they fill my heart. Keep me uptight. Too much. They know you're out of sight. Hey, look at it, baby. Where you get to do? Where you do the thing you do? Where you get to do? You're more than alright. They know you're out of sight. Gotta speak. Hey, always right. Gotta reach the decision. Know you always right. My heart delight, that's what you are. You know you're out of sight.
I guess I'm gonna stop it there. But again, that's how it works in practice. You can't sing that song correctly without that type of physical engagement in the
That was
interpretation.
ridiculously fun. Those dancers are so good. It
It's
makes me want
incredible.
to learn all the steps, and the audience was just going crazy.
Exactly. That's why James Brown is one of the most important and influential musicians in the history of the music, because he had the ability to use his physicality in that way, in addition to create the musical landscape in which he's operating, right? So there's a bunch of different things happening there all at once. So those are I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Those are some of the fundamental characteristics of African American music, right? We have the manipulation of sound to replicate the voice. We have the layering of contrasting sounds to create a unique kind of a combination. We have the manipulation of things like repeated rhythmic figures and syncopations and things to vary and extend performances. And then finally, we have the use of the body as a fundamental part of musical expression, whether that's dance or just using one's body while performing to engage the audience, as we saw James Brown do. So that's it. That's a crash course anyway in the fundamentals of African American music. And again, there's a very long and rich history to this music that I would encourage everyone to explore in more detail. But that should give you an overview of how it works anyway.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Lewis. I learned a ton. I loved the music clips. That was very, very interesting. I really also just loved what you said at the beginning about that someone playing the flute, maybe in Africa, a good note to them or success is if it sounded most like them or most like a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we had talked previously about some instruments that came from Africa and how they were changed or adapted to be part of American popular music. Mm-hmm. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that, perhaps about the banjo?
Sure. So I'd be happy to talk a little bit about the history of the banjo. So the banjo comes to, or actually the banjo is descended from, because the banjo actually is created in America and the Caribbean, and it's an instrument that is unique to the Americas, but it is descended from, that is, it's inspired by stringed instruments of West and Central Africa. So instruments like the kora, the ikanting of Senegal, the shalam, which is another similar instrument. All of these instruments have kind of a body that is made out of a gourd, and then there's animal skin stretched over the top, and then there are strings that are then kind of held over the top of that animal skin with a bridge, and then you pluck. And interestingly enough, this is what I was talking about, the North African connections. So the ancestors of the banjo came to West Africa by way of the Sahara. You know, the earliest lutes and stringed instruments of that kind are actually from kind of the Near East, like places like what is now Iraq, say, and then also Egypt. And so they arrive in West Africa in about the 9th century, at around the same time as Islam arrives in West Africa and is brought to that part of the continent by these same merchants and travelers who brought the religion with them. And so then, of course, you have these stringed instruments that develop. And then when Black people are brought from West Africa to America during the slave trade, when they arrive in America, they're now in this situation where there are people from all different nations and ethnicities who are mixed together. And kind of in that process of cultural coming together among all these different Black people, they create an instrument that is similar to West African instruments that they knew, but it is not a copy of any one of them, because it has elements of instruments from Nigeria, instruments from Senegal, again, instruments that were brought in from the Sahara. And so what the banjo is kind of an instrument that reflects African values, but it is not an instrument that was brought directly over from Africa. It's really unique to America, and it's a product of the African-American experience.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to get to our performers in just a minute. We're going to start with Domenica. I just want to ask you one question that's coming on YouTube from one of our viewers, Yakubi Nabil. He wants to know, is this type of music that's influenced by Africa or African-American music, limited to the Black community in the US? Is it only Black people who listen to this kind of music?
No, actually pretty much everybody listens to this. It's kind of, American music really is African-American music to a large extent. You know, the music that we think of as American, like hip hop music, like rock music, all of those different types of music come from the Black community, but now everybody listens to them, and everybody plays them too. And I think it's good that the music has had that type of impact. You know, the important thing is that we don't remember, the important thing is that we don't forget where it came from and that we remember its history. But it really is all over the country. Not only Black people listen to Black music, you know, everyone in America, which is a very diverse country, everybody has some kind of relationship to some type of Black music, no matter where they came from. And that's just because that's sort of part of American identity at this point.
Thank you for that. We are now ready for our musical performance, our first musical performance. I'm super excited to welcome Domenica Fossati, a Latin Grammy award-winning artist who's going to do a performance. So over to you, Domenica.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. That was really wonderful. Mr. Lewis, it was great. I really enjoyed that presentation. Since we were talking about African-American music, I thought, I'm a flutist, and I thought maybe of performing a piece that was written by a friend of mine. That's half of it is written and half of it is improvised using beatbox, which is, for those who don't know what it is, it's a form of making rhythm using different parts of your mouth, and it's still prominent, and it's used throughout hip hop since the beginning of hip hop. And even though I play flute, this is a way to accompany myself on flute and hip hop, and making beats at the same time. So this is about a 4-minute piece. It's not that long. Let's see, here we go.
Boom, 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 boom,
I hope that came through.
Yeah, that was so cool.
Whoa.
That was so cool. I didn't even know a person can make sounds like that, and half from your mouth, half in the flute. Oh, that was great. Thank you for
Thank you.
that.
I didn't know you could beatbox. Okay. Oh, that's amazing.
Thanks, Haile. Thank you, man.
Oh, that was wonderful. And actually, my husband, Adam, who's a flautist, is standing by me, and he's extremely impressed with that. Domenica, thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Okay, Haile, are you ready to perform?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Hello, all beautiful people tuned in. Let me see if I can get my pronunciation right. I wanted to, do my due diligence and try to step into the culture. So, salamu alaikum. Ane ismi Haile Supreme. Mesharfin Saha Lazawi. Ah, I've been practicing a
That's
little
great.
bit. I'm not sure that I actually made perfect sense, but I'm trying my best. Before I start, I would like to say to Dr. Lewis, I was completely floored by your presentation because oftentimes soul is an amorphous and elusive concept that is just usually relegated to something that you just got to feel. You can't really teach soul, throughout our culture. It's just something you got to have, you're born with, that you feel. But the fact that you're able to reverse engineer something that's so elusive and like almost make it quantifiable, it was really mind blowing because it's oftentimes almost impossible to reverse engineer something that's purely emotional and like in the cloud as far as the human existence, and for you to reverse engineer it. Like the thing that really stuck out to me the most about the presentation was that I never thought of before was a lot of times when people are playing instruments that are characterized as soulful or like being from the black experience, a lot of the times it's an instrument mimicking the human voice, which makes so much sense and really helps me understand and contextualize how to use that technique on an instrument, whether it's through flute, guitar, or drums. But that was really, really mind blowing, man. So thank you so much.
Thank you, man. I'm glad that it was. I'm glad that I was able to communicate that, and it means a lot to hear you say that.
Yeah, that was really, really fascinating. I'm definitely going to go back to that presentation. But as far as my musical contribution, again, I'm honored to be here. Saha to all the people in attendance. I'm going to be leading a sound bath, a meditative sound bath. The intention that I've set around this is on March 1st, it marked the 125th anniversary of the Battle of Adwa, which was fought in Ethiopia, where my family is from, my heritage is from. And that's an extremely important date because on March 1st, 1896 was the first time that a black nation was ever able to defeat a potential colonial power. And the only African nation to be able to maintain its sovereignty by defeating a colonial power, with evil intentions. So with that being said, since March 1st was so recent and as it is such a day of pride for all Ethiopians, I'm going to lead a meditation and ask that everybody will close their eyes and imagine their ancestors. Imagine yourself with your ancestors. Imagine yourself with the lineage that came before you. I want you to imagine yourself receiving wisdom, whether it's a message or a hug or some closure to some trauma. I just want you to imagine yourself with your eyes closed and focusing on your breath. Imagine your ancestors. Receive some wisdom from them of all the tribulations that they've been through so that you can take that wisdom and reimagine a better future, and make this world a better place than how you found it. So with that being said, I'm going to ask everybody, please close your eyes. And maybe you too, and if your husband is watching or on the side, everybody close your eyes and just focus on your breath. And if at any point you feel so moved to respond to the music, just sing and hold it out as long as you can. Just whatever note, don't judge yourself, sing. So, here we go. Thank you, everybody tuned in. If you still have your eyes closed, I ask that you take a moment and really connect and see what it feels like to be embraced by your ancestors, what knowledge, what wisdom you can go. how can we apply that to the present day so that we can create a better future? So thank you all again. My name is Haile Supreme, and very blessed and honored to be here. I had a technical hiccup, but thank y'all for bearing with me there.
No, thank you so much. Again, that was Haile Supreme performing a meditative sound bath in honor of his ancestors and Ethiopia's Battle of Adwa. That was very cool and beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Of course. And for anybody wondering what was that word that I was repeating over and over, Zebra, it's actually a war cry. Or I don't want to say war cry because that denotes sadness. We weren't sad. We were proud and powerful on the battlefield. So I'd reframe that as a war call. You know, it was something that really riled the soldiers up. It let the people know that it's time to fight for our land and protect our motherland. So I've always been utterly so moved emotionally and inspired by that and proud. So it's kind of like an incantation that you can repeat to yourself, and something that I found while searching through my ancestry. So thank you for holding space.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I think that's a message that will certainly resonate here in Algeria. So thank you so much for that. So thank you so much to our musicians, Haile Supreme and Domenica Fossati. Thank you to our academic curator, but is also a musician too, which is maybe why he's able to explain these concepts so clearly, Dr. Stephen Lewis. Thank you everybody for watching on YouTube. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss more talks like this one. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great night.